Welcome back to my Souls of the Peculiar channel. Today, I continue my video series, Strange Minds of History, the Ones We Never Understood. Grigori Rasputin, 1869 to 1916. Russian mystic, said to have had a strange influence on the Russian royal family. Part 1. He said he had two lives, one in heaven. You're sitting alone in the dark, aren't you? The wind outside hasn't stopped howling for hours, and in this strange silence between gusts, you can almost hear a voice whispering through the cold. It doesn't sound like a threat. It sounds like a prayer or a confession. I have lived more than one life, the voice says, one in the dirt of the earth and one in the arms of heaven. Who says something like that? A madman? Or someone who sees a world you've been trained to ignore? This is not a bedtime story. This is a door. And when you step through it, you'll meet a man who terrified a nation, not because he was powerful, but because he made them question what power really meant. His name was Grigori Yefimovich Rasputin, but no one remembers him by that. They remember him as the Holy Devil of Siberia. Siberia, 1870s. Village of Pokrovskoye. Snow like a white silence over black earth. You can barely call it a village, more like a cluster of wooden ribs scattered along the river Tura. The people here are poor, brutal, and suspicious of outsiders. But their lives are simple. Farm, pray, drink, survive. And then there's that boy. You see him now, 10 years old, barefoot in the snow. He's got this wild, unbrushed mane of dark hair and those eyes, too large for a child, always searching for something that isn't there. The locals say he's not right. They whisper he talks to animals, and that sometimes the animals listen. Once, a horse in a violent fit suddenly calmed when he put his hand on its face. Another time, a feverish child stopped convulsing when he laid beside her and began to pray. They're not sure if it's God working through him or something else. He doesn't go to school, can't read, but he talks about saints like he's met them. He disappears into the forest for days, comes back mumbling things like, "The sky opened to me. The angels told me how the earth breathes." His father beats him for skipping chores. His mother cries when he stares off into space for hours, not blinking. But no punishment touches him, not really. Because something inside him is already elsewhere. Years pass, and he grows tall and thin, with filthy clothes, gnarled hands, and a gait like he's both drunk and floating. He marries, as custom demands, a plain village girl named Praskovia. They have children. He seems for a moment tethered to earth. But tethered is not the same as anchored. They say he was wandering from monastery to monastery, sleeping in barns, barefoot, filthy, fasting for weeks at a time, eyes burning with a hunger no food could satisfy. He said he was looking for God. Or maybe running from the version of God they taught in church. What he finds instead is a shadow religion. Underground Russia, the secret paths of the Klists. You've never heard of them, but they were real. A secretive sect. They believed you had to sin deeply to be truly forgiven. That ecstasy, spiritual, physical, emotional, was the only path to divine union. They danced for hours, whirling like tops, until they collapsed weeping. Then came the rituals, intimate, raw, forbidden. And Rasputin watches, learns, participates, but also transforms. Because here, in the madness, he finds method. He learns how to hypnotize with a whisper, how to look at you until your skin itches and your knees buckle, how to speak in riddles that feel like prophecy. "Sin with me," he would say later, "so we can be clean together." Was he exploiting the system, or had he become its most terrifying disciple? By the time he returns home to Pokrovskoye, something in him has changed. His stare is deeper, his voice slower, more deliberate. People come to him now, for blessings, for cures, for secrets. He prays over cows, over babies, over bleeding men, And when some of them recover, word spreads. There's a man in Siberia, a filthy peasant, but his hands burn like candles, and he sees what others don't. Let's pause here together. You're hearing all this, maybe with skepticism, maybe fascination. But I want to ask you something, quietly. Have you ever met someone who scared you, not because they were cruel, but because they looked right through you, past the mask, past the voice, into something aching and unexplainable? Now imagine if that man walked into a palace. Rasputin doesn't care about power, not in the way men usually do. He wants a place to speak, to whisper into the ears of fate, and his moment is coming. But before the marble halls and royal scandals, you need to see him as he truly was, a wandering mystic with muddy feet, and a stare that could stop bleeding, who told people, "You laugh at me now, but your children's children will dream of my name." Next, the filthy stranger arrives in the capital. They call him mad, but they keep inviting him back. Part 2. A dirty pilgrim with burning eyes. Part 2. A dirty pilgrim with burning eyes. Imagine the smell first. Unwashed wool, sweat soaked into skin, something fermented, and something holy. Now imagine this. You are a noblewoman in St. Petersburg, wearing silk, your hands perfumed, your ears still ringing with Chopin from last night's salon. And into your parlor steps this man, tall, ragged, eyes like black fire. He doesn't bow. He doesn't even take off his boots. He just looks at you and says, "Your husband is ill." But it is not in the body, it is in the guilt. He must tell the truth or he will rot. And then he walks out. By dinner, you're weeping on the floor because he was right. That's how it starts. St. Petersburg, Russia's crown jewel, winter 1903. It is an empire of gold teeth and rotten gums. The city glitters, yes, chandeliers, marble staircases, silver cutlery carved with imperial eagles. But underneath, rot, poverty, secrets, whispers. The church is hollow. The people are starving. The royal family is drowning. And into this chaos walks Grigori Rasputin, wrapped in a threadbare cloak and a quiet grin, as if he's been waiting centuries for this exact moment. You see, by now, word has spread beyond Siberia. There's a man who heals with words, who knows sins before they're confessed, who can make you cry or convulse just by touching your forehead. He arrives in the capital like a storm no one invited. And the strangest thing happens. The aristocracy can't look away. They laugh at him, mock his peasant drawl, his broken grammar, his cracked boots and filthy nails. They call him muzhik, a farmhand, a joke, a freak show. But still, they keep inviting him back. Why? Because Rasputin doesn't care what they think. And somehow, that makes them think he's the only one who truly knows anything. He meets priests. He meets bishops. He tells one of them, "You worship robes, not God." He's nearly thrown out, but the bishop's sick mother walks again after Rasputin visits. The bishop never speaks against him again. He visits salons, says little, eats nothing, drinks everything. He lets women touch his beard, lean into his breath. One countess faints when he looks at her and says, "You cry in your sleep for someone who doesn't exist." Was he guessing? Or did he see her? The city becomes obsessed. Some call him a starets, a holy man. Others say he's a sex magician, a con artist, a madman. But even his enemies can't agree on what he is. Here's the paradox. He is both disgusting and divine. He smells like garlic and goat. But when he speaks, even atheists lean in. His eyes are the real weapon. Accounts from dozens of... And then, through a corridor of rumors and trembling introductions, Rasputin is summoned to meet a woman who will change his life, and whose life he will change in return. Tsarina Alexandra Fyodorovna. The German-born Empress of Russia, stern, shy, deeply religious, and heartbroken because her son, Alexei, the heir to the throne, is dying in secret. He has hemophilia, the disease of royal blood. A bruise could kill him. A fall could make him bleed internally until he dies in his mother's arms. No doctor is helped, and the Tsarina is desperate. When Rasputin enters her chamber for the first time, he doesn't bow. He looks her in the eyes and says, "God has heard you." That night, Alexei's bleeding slows. He survives. Let's stop here a moment. If it were just once, you'd say coincidence, but it happens again and again. When Alexei is near death, Rasputin is summoned, sometimes in person, sometimes by letter, and each time, the boy recovers. Even today, historians can't fully explain it. Did Rasputin use hypnosis? Was it psychosomatic? Did his presence calm the Tsarina so much that her calm passed on to her son? Or did he really touch something deeper? Some energy we still don't have words for. But here's where the shadows begin to curl in. Because now, he has access to the palace. And not just access, intimacy. Alexandra trusts him, worships him, believes he is the only one who can keep her son alive, and therefore keep the Romanov dynasty from collapse. And Rasputin knows it. But does he manipulate her? It's not that simple. Sometimes he disappears for months, refuses invitations, sleeps on straw, lives like a beggar. Other times, he drinks with prostitutes, dances barefoot in noble salons. He is chaotic. He is ungovernable. He follows no rule, but his own rhythm. "Don't try to understand me," he once told a minister. "Just listen or don't. But I am the only one who's not lying." He becomes a symbol, and symbols are dangerous. To some, he is a sign that God still walks among men. To others, he is the proof that the monarchy has lost its mind. And slowly, enemies begin to circle. Bishops, generals, ministers. They all ask the same question. How can the fate of an empire hang on the word of a barefoot peasant? But no one dares touch him yet. Because Rasputin has become something more than a man. He has become a prophecy with dirty hands. Next, the boy begins bleeding again. And once more, Rasputin is summoned, this time from hundreds of miles away. And again, the bleeding stops. People start to believe he cannot be killed. Part 3. The Mad Monk Who Spoke to Emperors. Part 3. The Mad Monk Who Spoke to Emperors. There's something unspoken in every throne room. It's not about the crown, not the gold, not even the army. It's fear. That the emperor may not be in control. That something older, stranger, or smaller might be pulling the strings. Now picture this, you're Tsar Nicholas II. You rule over 1/6 of the Earth's landmass. But your son, the fragile heir to that kingdom, is lying in a velvet bed, bleeding inside his body where no blade ever touched him. And the only person who can stop the bleeding is a man who smells like livestock and refuses to call you Your Majesty. That man, Grigori Rasputin, the barefoot holy man of Siberia, is now walking through the gilded halls of the Romanov palace like he was born there. Tsarskoye Selo, the imperial residence, 1907. Alexei, the Tsarevich, has taken a fall. His leg is swelling. He screams when anyone touches him. The doctors can do nothing, only watch. The Tsarina is collapsing. Her prayers are no longer enough, and so she sends a desperate telegram to Rasputin, hundreds of miles away. He replies simply, "The boy will not die. The doctors must leave him alone." And then, something unthinkable happens. Alexei's condition begins to improve. The swelling stops. His fever breaks. His cries soften into sleep. No treatment, no surgery, just a letter. It's easy to explain it away. Coincidence, placebo, divine timing. But you're not Alexandra. You're not the mother holding the blood-soaked sheets of your only son. To her, it's not a miracle. It's proof. Proof that God is listening. And Rasputin is the one doing the talking. She writes in her diary, "Our friend is always right. He is a gift from heaven. From this moment forward, Rasputin is not just a visitor, he is family. He calls Nicholas and Alexandra by pet names. He kisses their hands, and sometimes their cheeks. He walks into their chambers unannounced. He prays over Alexei, then jokes about vodka. The servants whisper, the ministers grumble, the courtiers choke on their own envy. But no one dares remove him, because Rasputin is now the thread holding the throne together. Let's take a breath here. You may wonder, was Rasputin really manipulating the royals? Did he want power? Or was he just there, glowing in the dark, too strange to resist? The truth is, he never asked for a title. He never joined the government, never sat on a council. He didn't need to. His power wasn't official. It was psychological. He knew something that few people ever truly learn. When people believe you're essential, you don't need a crown.
But with influence comes paranoia, and soon the whispers become louder, dangerous.
The Orthodox Church hates him. The ministers resent him. The press begins to call him a fraud, a fornicator, a devil in monk's robes. One newspaper writes, "The empire is ruled not by the Tsar, but by a lunatic from the swamps." Rasputin laughs when he reads it. He once said, "Let them write lies. It proves they are afraid." But even he can sense the shift. And still, he doesn't stop. He attends royal dinners. He hears military strategy. He passes messages between ministers. He blesses soldiers before they go to war. Imagine it, a mystic who cannot read maps, influencing decisions that will kill thousands. Was he giving spiritual comfort, or steering the empire into a grave? Even now, historians argue. Some say he saved the monarchy by keeping Alexandra from total collapse. Others say he destroyed it by becoming a cancer the body couldn't expel. And what of Nicholas? The Tsar is soft-spoken, weak-willed, a man more comfortable in a garden than on a battlefield. He doesn't trust easily, but he trusts Alexandra. And Alexandra says, Rasputin is sent by God. So Nicholas nods, watches, smiles politely. But inside, he's drowning too. Imagine being an emperor and realizing the one man your wife clings to for hope is someone you cannot control. At this point, Rasputin begins to make enemies in higher places. Military commanders, aristocratic families, bishops, even secret police. They accuse him of seduction, of drunken orgies, of poisoning the monarchy from within. Some of it is true, some of it is lies, but it doesn't matter, because Rasputin no longer lives in truth or lies. He lives in legend. He once told a duchess, "They cannot kill me. I have seen my death, and it is not by their hands." He walks through ballrooms with mud still on his boots. He drinks until he collapses, then wakes up quoting scripture. He cries when he sees birds killed. He caresses the faces of noblewomen, then sleeps on a barn floor like a beggar. People don't know whether to worship him or have him executed. And perhaps that's the secret, because when people can't decide whether you're a prophet or a monster, you become something worse, a mirror of everything they fear inside themselves. Next, the child bleeds again, and again, Rasputin saves him. But this time, the empire's patience is thinner than the boy's blood. Part 4. They said he could stop the bleeding with his eyes.
Part 4. They said he could stop the bleeding with his eyes.
You ever see someone stop time? Not with magic, not with force, but with their eyes? You're in the room. Candlelight flickers. The air is tight. A child is screaming, clutching his side. Eyes rolled white. Sheets soaked crimson. No one moves. Except him. He steps forward slowly like he's wading through invisible water. He says nothing. Just kneels beside the boy and places 2 fingers on his forehead. And then he looks at him. Not at him, into him, as if peeling away the body to speak directly to the pain. The child whimpers once more, then quiets. His breathing slows. The bleeding stops. No doctor could explain it. No priest could replicate it. But everyone in that room would later swear on their lives. He didn't pray. He didn't chant. He just looked. and it was like the blood itself changed its mind. Tsarskoye Selo, 1912. The Imperial Nursery. Alexei has suffered a carriage injury. His thigh is badly bruised. Just a bruise by any normal standard, but for him it's a death sentence. He's screaming, feverish. His pulse is fading. No one can stop it. Not the German doctors, not the French surgeons, not the tears of the Tsarina, knelt beside his bed, her lips raw from kissing icons. In desperation, she does the unthinkable. She sends a telegram to Rasputin. He is hundreds of miles away in Siberia. He receives the message in the dead of night. He writes back, "Do not worry. God has seen your tears. The little one will not die. Let the doctors go. He needs only rest." And then, once again, the impossible happens. The next day, Alexei improves. Within a week, he is sitting up, laughing. The bruising fades. To Alexandra, it's no longer a question. Rasputin is not just a healer. He is a miracle on legs. But miracles, especially those that defy reason, come with a price. Outside the palace walls, the people are growing angry. They've heard rumors, ugly ones, that a dirty peasant sleeps in the Tsarina's chambers, that he bathes in holy water and then drinks vodka straight from the bottle, that the monarchy is no longer ruled by Romanovs, but by a mad monk with hypnotic eyes. Cartoons appear in underground papers, Rasputin with his arms around the Tsarina, puppeteering the Tsar, Rasputin drowning the empire in wine, lust, and incense. But inside the palace, the opposite is happening. Rasputin is at his most serene. He doesn't gloat. He doesn't demand riches. He begins making recommendations. Not orders, not yet, but names. He tells Alexandra which officials are corrupt, which generals lack faith, which advisors are poisoning the Tsar with fear. She listens. Nicholas, ever obedient to his wife, signs off. Ministers rise and fall based on Rasputin's whispers. A man with no title, no education, and no army is now reshaping the Russian government from within. You might say, surely this is manipulation. But pause, look deeper. Rasputin often asked for nothing. He wore old clothes, slept on bare mattresses, refused gold. He wandered back to Siberia for months at a time. He didn't chase power, he haunted it. And like all good ghosts, he could disappear without warning and return just as easily. But every time Alexei's health faltered, Rasputin reappeared. And every time he did, the boy lived. How do you argue with that? Here's the question that keeps creeping in like smoke under a door. Was Rasputin truly healing the boy? Or was it Alexandra's belief in him that changed the energy of the room? Modern scholars have offered theories that Rasputin used hypnosis, that he calmed the mother, which calmed the boy, that he told doctors to stop treatments that were making things worse. All of that may be true, but when you ask those who were there, when you read their letters, their memoirs, their trembling recollections, they all say the same thing. He had a power, one that defied understanding, not of the body, but of the soul. And still, the empire hated him. Why? Because Rasputin was too real, too unclean, too unpolished, too raw. He reminded the noble class that God might prefer a barefoot peasant over a silk-cloaked general. That holiness didn't come with incense and Latin, but with dirt, sweat, and unfiltered truth. And the closer he got to the throne, the more terrified they became. Not of him, but with what his existence meant. He told a general once, "I am not what you think. I don't want your empire. I want to make sure the boy lives, because when he dies, the sun sets for all of you." And that general never looked him in the eye again. By 1913, Rasputin is no longer just a man. He is myth, a saint, a devil, a riddle in human skin. And even he seems to sense that the storm is coming. He begins to drink more. His letters become darker. He says things like, "They will tear my body apart, but I will still speak. You will hear me long after I'm dead." And Alexandra writes in her journal, "If they destroy him, they destroy us." Next, Part 5. The women called him a saint, the men a demon. There's something dangerous about being touched by both desire and divinity. It blurs the lines, makes people confused, makes people afraid. They don't know whether to kneel before you or strip you down to see if you bleed like everyone else. That was Rasputin in the palace. A man who could walk into a drawing room smelling like goats and garlic, and leave with every woman in tears, clutching a prayer card or stroking the lock of hair he gave them. Some called it charisma. Others said it was witchcraft. But no one could explain why they kept inviting him back. St. Petersburg, 1913 to 1914. The empire is cracking. Quietly at first, like hairline fractures beneath marble. Famine in the countryside. Revolts whispered in alleyways. Factories drowning in smoke and broken backs. But inside the noble homes, a new obsession is blooming. His name is Grigori Rasputin, and he is the topic of every whispered conversation, every gossip column, every midnight diary entry. But this time, it's not about the Tsar. It's about the women. They come to him with ailments, spiritual sickness, marital grief, infertility, unrest, fear. He touches their heads, their hands, their bellies. He tells them things no man should know. You wake at night and touch your chest, afraid your heart has stopped. Your husband dreams of a woman who wears green. You already know. They sob. They confess. They offer themselves, in prayer or in something more. And Rasputin? Sometimes he says no. Other times, he doesn't. Because Rasputin believed sin was not something to avoid. It was something to pass through. You need to understand. He wasn't just seducing them. He was undoing them. To the men, this was filth. To the women, it felt like awakening. He told them, if you want to be clean, come with me into the dirt. Let your soul shiver. Let your body break. Then you will know what love feels like. And they believed him. This created two armies. The women, noble, devout, shaken, who swore Rasputin changed their lives, healed their spirits, awakened their courage. The men, powerful, furious, humiliated, who wanted his body burned and his memory erased. But Rasputin knew something about power that most of them didn't. A man loved by desperate women becomes immune to politics. Of course, the stories multiplied. They said he slept with duchesses, with nuns, with prostitutes who kissed his filthy feet and called him father. They said he had a huge gift, physically speaking. Even claimed a piece of it was preserved in a jar after his death. That part, by the way, is probably myth. Probably. But the myth was the point. He had become a fever dream with a beard. And still, despite it all, Alexandra stood by him. She wrote, "He is our lamp in the dark. His soul is pure, even if his clothes are not." She dismissed the rumors as slander. Blamed the aristocracy for their filth and jealousy. She believed, no, knew, that Rasputin was chosen by God to protect her son, and anyone who doubted that was committing treason against heaven. The Tsar, meanwhile, was cracking under the strain. Nicholas didn't know what to believe anymore. He was emperor in name, But Rasputin was the storm behind the curtain. He'd never ordered Rasputin into exile, not because he couldn't, but because he was terrified of what might happen if he did. The last time they'd tried to keep Rasputin away, Alexei nearly died. So Rasputin stayed, laughing, drunk, whispering in bedrooms, kissing icons, unbothered by scandal because scandal only made him more powerful. But outside the palace gates, the people were watching, and they weren't amused. Bread was vanishing, war was looming. And the newspapers, now emboldened, began printing headlines like, "The Tsarina's lover, the mad monk in bed with the throne." There was no proof, but in times of hunger, rumors feed the mob better than facts ever could, and Rasputin, like a torch in a dry field, was too flammable to ignore. It is in this firestorm that the assassination attempts begin. First, a knife. A peasant woman, calling him the Antichrist, stabs him in the stomach in broad daylight. He nearly dies, spends months recovering. His intestines are partially removed. His gait becomes heavier, slower. But his stare? Sharper. When he emerges, thinner, limping, and silent, people say, "He came back wrong. They couldn't kill him." It only adds to the myth. Rasputin begins writing letters to Alexandra full of visions. "I saw blood in the snow, a throne sinking into mud. I saw soldiers without faces, and I saw myself, burning, but smiling." He tells her, "If I am killed by nobles, your family will fall. Within 2 years, all will be lost." And she believes him. It's now a game of time. The men of the court are planning something. But Rasputin, with his prophecies, his women, and his terrible grin, is already waiting. "They think I fear them," he says, "but I've seen their faces, after they're dead." Next, the empire tumbles into war, and Rasputin, half alive and half myth.
Part 6. Russia is sick, and the devil is its doctor. There comes a time when a country doesn't just need a revolution, it needs someone to blame. And when the windows rattle, and the wheat dies, and the soldiers vanish into trenches that never end, they don't look up, they look inward, into the rot, into the palace, into him. Because it's easier to say Russia is falling because of Rasputin than to admit that the crown itself is hollow. 1914. The Great War begins. Russia bleeds into Europe. The Tsar sends soldiers by the hundreds of thousands, ill-equipped, ill-fed, ill-prepared. They march into bullets with wooden rifles. They pray into empty air, and they die. By winter's end, more than 1 million Russian men are gone. The empire begins to shake. But inside the palace, Rasputin stays. Still whispering, still praying, still watching. Let's pause. Let's step closer. Let's look into his eyes again. This is a man who has survived assassination, scandal, and exile. A man who told the Tsarina, long before the war, that blood will drown this empire, not from outside, but from within. The enemy is not Germany. The enemy is silence at your table. Now, as the war deepens, Rasputin's visions darken. He starts writing letters, not to nobles, but to God. Or maybe to ghosts. I see horses on fire. I see ice breaking under crowns. I see myself, torn apart like bread. And yet, the Tsarina clings to him tighter than ever. With Nicholas now at the front, commanding the army in a move even his generals called suicidal, Alexandra rules in his absence. But she doesn't rule alone. She rules with Rasputin. He becomes her spiritual advisor, political confidant, even co-regent in everything but name. He recommends ministers, advises on war decisions, vetoes policies. And the people begin to whisper, "A mad monk is running the empire." And what's worse? They're not entirely wrong. He is everywhere and nowhere. Sitting beside generals, drinking with prostitutes, weeping beside dying children, writing letters to peasant women, scolding bishops. And every time someone questions it, Alexandra snaps. Do not insult God's messenger. He sees what you are too blind to feel. But outside the palace, Russia is dying, and the press, no longer loyal, begin painting Rasputin not as a mystic, but as a demon. They say he's sleeping with the Tsarina. They say he's a German spy. They say he's poisoning the water, cursing the troops, bleeding the treasury. They even say his eyes glow in the dark. Cartoons show him with horns, with fangs, with strings tied to the emperor's hands. And when Rasputin walks through the streets now.
But here's the tragic genius of Rasputin's story. The more they hated him, the more powerful he became. Because in a land where nothing made sense, he made just enough sense to keep people listening. And still, Alexei doesn't die. Every time he falls ill, Rasputin touches his forehead, whispers into his skin, and the boy rises. But this is not healing anymore. It's suspense. It's ticking clocks. It's prophecy with a dagger behind its back. The court knows. The generals know. The church knows. Rasputin must go. Not with exile, not with shame, but with something sharper. He won't leave, a noble once said. He has to be removed. Meanwhile, Rasputin begins to speak in riddles more often. He tells a maid, "I saw a soldier drowning in snow, but he had no wounds." He tells a prostitute, "They'll kill me and pretend they didn't, but their eyes will scream." He tells the Tsarina, "If I die by common men, you will live. If I die by your lords, you will all fall within 2 years. Not a single child of yours will live." She is horrified. She cries. She begs him to leave the city, to hide, to run, to go back to Siberia. He refuses. What I saw was written, and it ends here. Now imagine the scene. A city freezing. Bread lines stretching like graves, the war raging, and in the middle of it a man with wild eyes and a dirty beard walking through snow like it's his final pilgrimage. He knows they're watching. He knows what's coming. And yet, he offers no resistance. Because Rasputin believed something to the very end. A man doesn't die when the knife enters. He dies when the story forgets him. And I will not be forgotten. Next, the night of blood, wine, and poison, and the death that refused to happen. Part 7. The night they tried to kill a ghost.
Part 7. The night they tried to kill a ghost.
There are deaths you can explain. And then there's this one. A death that feels more like a ritual than a murder. A death that reads like bad fiction. Too theatrical, too gruesome, too full of failure. Because this wasn't just a man dying. This was the night Russia tried to kill a ghost. And the ghost refused. December 29th, 1916. Petrograd, formerly St. Petersburg. The city is buried under snow. The war is bleeding into every corner of the empire. The palace is brittle with fear. And in a noble mansion, candles flicker in a drawing room, where death has been set like a table. Waiting for one guest, Grigori Rasputin. The hosts? Prince Felix Yusupov, one of the richest men in Russia. Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, a Romanov by blood. And a handful of officers, nobles, and conspirators. They say they're throwing a quiet party. They say they just want to talk. They've even promised Rasputin he'll meet Yusupov's beautiful wife. They dress in tuxedos. They chill the wine. They lace the cakes and drinks with enough cyanide to kill a bear. Rasputin walks in, smiling.
Let's slow this moment down. He walks through the double doors. The candles glow against the crimson wallpaper. The wine is dark and sweet. The cakes smell like almonds, sweet but deadly. They laugh, they toast. Rasputin eats, he drinks, and nothing happens. Nothing. The poison does not work. His pulse doesn't quicken, his skin doesn't pale. He just keeps talking, calmly, lazily, like a man enjoying an odd little evening. Felix excuses himself, runs upstairs to panic. What do you do when death refuses to take the bait? They return. Felix says he needs to show Rasputin a gift in the basement. Rasputin, curious, follows. Down the stone stairs, into the cold, echoing cellar. There's nothing down there. Just barrels, boxes, dust, and then a pistol. A single shot, point blank, right to the chest. Rasputin staggers, falls, bleeds. They check his pulse. He is still. He is not breathing. They toast upstairs. They believe it's over. But it's not. Because a few minutes later, as Felix walks back down to check the body, he sees something move. A hand. Then both eyes, open, burning with rage and something not human. Rasputin rises. He doesn't scream, he doesn't flail. He lunges, grabs Felix, tries to strangle him, slams into the door, crawls up the cellar stairs. He escapes, into the courtyard, bleeding, stumbling. They chase him. 2 more shots fired into his back. He falls again. This time, it must be done. A 3rd shot, to the forehead. He finally collapses into the snow, face up, eyes still open. But even that's not enough. They beat him with chains, wrap him in a carpet, drive out to the Neva River, black and frozen, and dump him in. When they find his body days later, the autopsy reveals cyanide in the system. Gunshots to chest, back, head. Blunt trauma. But here's the part that everyone remembers. Water in the lungs. He was still alive when they dumped him in the river. He died by drowning. The ghost did not go quietly. Back at the palace, Alexandra collapses in grief. She writes, "They have destroyed our protector. We are blind now. We are deaf. We are alone." But Rasputin had already left her a letter, a final prophecy, written just days before. "If I am killed by common men, Russia will endure. But if I am killed by nobles, then the Tsar and his family will not live 2 years. They will be killed by the Russian people, and their name will vanish in blood." He signed it, as always, Grigori. And then, silence. The newspapers say little. The court breathes a sigh of relief. The nobles toast each other. They think the nightmare is over. But they have no idea what they've done, because something shifts. Within weeks of Rasputin's murder, the Russian army begins to collapse. The people rise in hunger and rage. Revolution surges through Petrograd like fire through dry wheat. Nicholas II abdicates. And within 2 years, just as Rasputin foretold, the Tsar, the Tsarina, Alexei, and all their daughters are executed. In a basement. Shot, stabbed, burned. Their bodies dumped in the woods. So was he a monster? A holy man? A fraud? A madman? Maybe he was all of them. But one thing is certain. Rasputin saw it coming. And no one listened. Next, what they tried to erase, and why Rasputin still haunts history like a riddle that won't solve itself.
Part 8. The corpse that wouldn't stay buried.
Part 8. The corpse that wouldn't stay buried. You would think that after all that, the poison, the bullets, the drowning, the prophecy, Rasputin's story would end quietly. But ghosts like his don't fade. They multiply, in shadows, in whispers, in the uneasy glances exchanged in palace halls even after he was gone, in the way no one could ever quite explain why he had to die. Because Grigori Rasputin didn't vanish. He simply became larger than life in death. 1917 to 1918. The Russian Empire collapses. The Romanovs fall. Revolution consumes the streets. The nobles who killed Rasputin are scattered. Yusupov flees into exile, writes a book, poses for portraits, but his eyes never quite smile the way they used to. Dmitry Pavlovich is sent to war, then to Persia. He will die quietly in exile. And back in Petrograd, people begin to say it. Rasputin warned us, and now the curse has begun. They burn his diaries, ransack his home, destroy the letters between him and Alexandra. They do everything they can to erase the evidence he ever existed. But history doesn't obey destruction. It thrives on contradiction, and Rasputin was the perfect contradiction. A man of God who bathed in sin, a peasant who ruled an empire's heart, a healer who became a symbol of rot, a prophet who smiled as his prophecy unfolded. The strange thing? His name survives. Long after the generals are forgotten, long after the ministers' statues are torn down, long after even the Romanovs become a whisper in schoolbooks, Rasputin becomes a myth. He appears in poems, plays, films. His name is used to sell perfume, vodka, even music. He becomes the villain in Western tales of the Russian collapse, the dark-eyed monk who seduced a queen and murdered a dynasty. But the real Rasputin, the one whose breath calmed a dying child, that version gets lost in the fog. Let's go back just once more. July 17, 1918, Ekaterinburg. In a dark basement, the last Romanovs are executed. Bullets ricochet, screams echo. Alexei, the boy Rasputin protected with prayers, dies after the longest struggle. The prophecy is fulfilled. 2 years, almost to the day, since Rasputin was thrown into the Neva River. The silence that follows feels cosmic, as if Russia itself is waiting to exhale. Decades pass. The Soviet Union rises. Lenin, Stalin, wars, walls, secrets, and still, people whisper about Rasputin. Not in the way of scholars, but in superstition, in flickers. Did you know his body refused to burn? Did you hear he had second sight? Didn't his killers all die mysteriously? There's even a story, impossible to confirm, but impossible to kill, that after the Bolsheviks exhumed Rasputin's body in 1917 to burn it.
Let's talk psychology for a moment. Why does Rasputin still haunt us? Why does he show up in every tale of the Romanovs? Why do we still argue, more than a century later, about what he was? The answer is not in history. It's in us. Because Rasputin wasn't just a man. He was a walking question. What if holiness looks like madness? What if the one who saves us makes us uncomfortable? What if the strangest person in the room is the only one who actually sees what's coming? In modern terms, maybe Rasputin would be called a trauma empath, a spiritual disruptor, a man with dangerous charisma and a divine complex. He might be on podcasts or banned from them. He might be locked up for his unpredictability or become a cult figure online. But whatever he'd be, you'd remember him. Because some minds are too strange, too deep, too unclassifiable. They don't fit into categories. They slip through fingers like smoke. They die and somehow never go away. Rasputin once said to Alexandra, "They will kill me, and then they will try to kill the memory of me. But memories are not bones. You cannot burn them." He was right. Because here we are in 2025, still speaking his name, still wondering who he was, still not understanding him. And maybe that's exactly what he wanted. Next, behind the veil, what Rasputin believed, and why he never truly feared death. Part 9. The Man Who Laughed at Death Long Before It Came.
Part 9. The Man Who Laughed at Death Long Before It Came. How do you live when you already know how you're going to die? More importantly, how do you laugh in the face of it? Most of us spend our lives trying to outrun death, avoiding the mirror, dodging illness, clutching at youth like it's a raft in a storm. But Rasputin didn't run. He walked straight into it, smiling, bleeding, drunk on destiny, as if death itself was just another pilgrim who'd come too late to the miracle. You see, he spoke about his death constantly, not as a man afraid, but as a man aware. He once told a young aristocrat, "Death and I, we nod when we pass in the hallway. He's not ready yet, but he's curious." And to Alexandra more than once, "They'll kill me not because I sin, but because I make sin visible." It wasn't morbid. It was matter of fact, like someone reading ahead in a book they already know ends in fire. Siberia, 1890s. Before the fame, before the palace, he's just a barefoot peasant, Grigori, wandering the wilds, living off bread and prayer. But even then, he's talking about visions. He tells people, "I saw the Virgin. I saw saints with broken mouths. I saw myself underwater, breathing. I saw a crown in the snow and blood on its jewels." People laugh at him, call him drunk, possessed, touched by fever. But when he touches them, when he places that wide, scarred hand on their chest, they stop laughing. Because suddenly their fever breaks, or their toothache fades, or their grief lifts like a curtain in the wind. And they begin to whisper. He walks with someone, something, not all of it human. Rasputin's relationship with death wasn't just prophetic. It was almost intimate. He spoke of it as a traveler speaks of a road he'll take soon, but not yet. And when others panicked at illness or injury, Rasputin barely blinked. After he was stabbed in 1914, nearly gutted by a religious fanatic, he didn't curse the woman. He just muttered, bleeding into the floor, "It wasn't the time. I saw a river. This is not that river." In the following weeks, he claimed to have left his body. He told Alexandra, "I stood at the foot of my own bed. I watched the doctors work. I saw you cry and God shake his head." He believed he had died, briefly, and returned with clarity. That's when his letters changed. He wrote less about Russia, more about souls, less about courts, more about what comes after. You may think he was delusional, but think, what does it mean to walk through life certain of your death and still help others breathe? Wouldn't that make you feel? His enemies called him manipulative, a con man, a pervert, a monster, but very few of them ever said he was afraid. Even Yusupov, one of his killers, later admitted, "He looked at me as if he pitied me, as if I didn't understand the joke." And maybe that's the key to Rasputin. He understood the joke, the cosmic absurdity of it all. Empires built on bones, nobles drunk on privilege, kneeling before a peasant with God in his teeth. He once told a general, "You think you're the future? I've seen the future. It looks like ashes and silence." And still, he laughed. At opulence, at pride, at the rules of men in wigs pretending they could tame chaos. Because Rasputin was chaos, wrapped in scripture, sweat, and dark eyes. And when you are chaos, you don't fear death. You welcome it when it comes. Not as punishment, but as confirmation that your time mattered. In today's world, they'd probably put him on medication, call him bipolar, diagnose him, sedate him. Or maybe he'd start a spiritual YouTube channel, pull millions of lost souls into live streams about healing and demons and dreams. He would be mocked or worshipped. Probably both, because men like Rasputin aren't supposed to exist. But when they do, the world never forgets them. In the final weeks of his life, he grew quieter, not less intense, just softer. He touched people longer, hugged children, wrote letters like farewells. One note to a palace maid read,
You have kind eyes. Keep them open. Don't let the devils make you forget beauty. Another, left unsent. I am leaving soon, but I won't be far. Not all journeys need footsteps. So when the poison didn't kill him, when the bullets didn't stop him, when even the river had to choke the life out of him, it wasn't just shocking, it was proof that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't entirely of this world. Next, the final part, what Rasputin teaches us and why his story still shakes the soul of every empire. Part 10. The Holy Fool Who Saw the Empire Fall.
Part 10. The Holy Fool Who Saw the Empire Fall. Let's sit quietly now. Let the snow settle. The guns have gone silent. The palace windows are shattered. The Romanovs are gone. And Rasputin? Still here. Not in flesh, but in questions that won't die. Because every time you look at history's ruins, you'll find a strange figure walking through the ashes with a grin too wide for comfort. A barefoot prophet, a laughing healer, a holy fool. He once said to a bishop, "The empire is sick, but it doesn't want medicine. It wants a mirror that doesn't show the rot." That's what Rasputin was, a mirror, cracked, dirty, unsettling, but honest. And what do people do to mirrors that reflect too much? They smash them. Russia, post-1918. The monarchy is gone. The Bolsheviks rise. A new order is forged with iron and fear. But Rasputin lingers, in Soviet silence, in forbidden diaries, in eyes that avoid speaking his name out loud, because what if the ghost still listens? They burned his memory, but it kept growing back, in rumors, in village prayers, in underground churches where old women still whisper, he wasn't perfect, but he was chosen. He remains a contradiction no regime could resolve, too filthy to canonize, too spiritual to dismiss, too absurd to accept, too prophetic to ignore. Rasputin lived in the cracks, the spaces between saints and sinners, between genius and madness, between what we believe and what we fear might actually be true. In psychology, there's a term, liminal. It means existing on the threshold, between categories, between identities, between meanings. That was Rasputin, a liminal soul in a rigid empire. And because the empire couldn't define him, they decided to destroy him. But here's the twist. By killing Rasputin, they didn't save the empire. They doomed it. Let's return to that final prophecy. His letter to Alexandra. If I die at the hands of the nobility, your family will not live more than 2 years. The people will rise, the empire will burn. It came true, word for word. You can argue it was a lucky guess. You can say it was political savvy. You can even say it was manipulation. But still, it came true. And in Russia, prophecies that come true have a strange way of turning men into legends. So what is the lesson of Rasputin? Is it a warning about unchecked power, a tale of seduction and superstition, a cautionary story about what happens when mystics enter politics? Yes. But it's more than that. It's about how empires fall, not from enemies.
And what about you, listening now? What do you do when someone speaks uncomfortable truths but in strange clothing with strange habits in a voice you don't like? Do you laugh? Do you silence them? Do you look away? Or do you ask yourself, why does this make me uneasy? Because that was Rasputin's real power, not prophecy, not healing, not influence, but provocation. He forced people to confront their illusions. He made them squirm. He made them feel. And in the sterile halls of power, that was unforgivable. You may still be wondering, was he good? Was he evil? Was he insane? The answer is yes, yes, and yes. But maybe more than anything else, he was brave. Brave enough to live without a mask. Brave enough to love what was ugly, brave enough to be misunderstood forever and keep walking anyway.
In Russian folklore, there's a sacred fool, the Urodivy, a madman of God, someone who wanders barefoot, talks in riddles, weeps in markets, shouts at nobles. People mock him, but secretly, they fear he sees more than they do. That was Rasputin, the last sacred fool of an empire that didn't know how to listen. Dream of a man with tangled hair and laughing eyes, standing in snow, arms wide, whispering things you don't want to hear. Don't be afraid. He's just checking to see if you're still listening.
Do you know anyone in Vietnamese history who was more eccentric? And your opinion, is eccentric another word for crazy, or for a genius we haven't understood yet? Whose story do you want to hear next in our series, Strange Minds of History, the ones we never understood?